Welcome to our midweek thoughts. As the evenings draw in and we start to move into autumn this month, I want to share with you a story from Margaret Silf's book of wisdom stories. It was autumn in the woods, and most of the leaves had already fallen from the trees and were lying on the frosty grass, feeling rather sorry for themselves. Others were lying in halfway houses, like on the branches of the conifers, waiting to see what would happen next. It was time for the autumn assembly, when Mother Nature, their beloved head teacher, would address them all. There was an atmosphere of anticipation and a degree of anxiety in the air. Mother Nature very rarely called them all together for a pep talk. She usually communicated with them quietly and individually, in the silent recesses of their hearts, guiding them in the ways of life. But the autumn assembly was different. "My children," she began, "you're probably wondering why I've called you together and what's going to happen now that you've fallen from your trees." There was a rustle of assent. "Now you remember that half a year ago you were just sprouting. Everything centred on you. We all told you how fresh and green and beautiful you were, and we did everything we could to help you grow and blossom. But now you are entering the next stage of your lives. It may look like dying to you, but actually it's a new beginning. Now, as you lie here on the ground, you are learning to let go of your separate existences, beautiful though those have been, in order to contribute to a bigger story for all my creation. I'm going to gather you all together now to make a blanket for the earth, to keep her warm and sheltered through the cold winter months. Beneath that blanket, the new seeds will begin to germinate for next year's springtime. You yourselves will begin to disintegrate into the ground, but actually I will be transforming you into nourishment for the next generation. This way, you will live forever. And there's one more thing I ask of you," she continued. "I want you to be an example to my human children. They don't always listen to wisdom as you do. They too spend the first half of their lives centred mainly around becoming the individual person that they can be, and then the later years come and they too have to let go and surrender to the call to become part of the greater whole, a greater good. They find that hard too. In your autumn days, you have a great deal to teach them." As she spoke, the rabbits and the squirrels were listening too, and a flock of geese flew overhead. "See," she said, "these other children of mine are learning the same life lesson. They are also an example to the human children. See how in northern regions the rabbit gradually relinquishes the rich colour of his fur to turn white, so he can be safe from predators in the snow. See how the squirrels prepare for hard times by saving and storing what they do not need. See the geese, how when the time is right and they have raised their young, they let go of their familiar ways and places and fly trustingly into the unknown. All of these have much to teach the human children. And you, my beautiful fallen leaves, are part of this great lesson too. Trust me now, and let me fold you into winter's blanket." And one by one, the leaves settled into the arms of their dear mother and consented to be part of a bigger story. So often we have lessons to learn from nature. And I think sometimes we need to be reminded that we are part of a bigger story than we can see. And that although things are changing, it is all part of this bigger picture. Times are changing, and we're learning to think of others and not just ourselves, to protect others and not just ourselves. As long as human beings have walked this earth, we've asked ourselves, how did this universe happen? Did it just happen, or is it an expression of some wisdom far beyond anything our minds can grasp? And we know that there's wisdom to be found in many aspects of life and faith, in nature, in experiences passed through generations. But there is an amazing amount to be learnt from the wisdom of a tree. A tree that has perhaps lived for many years and seen the cycles of life that play themselves out in her roots and branches, how it's sometimes wet, sometimes so cold, sometimes the sun shines, all sent from God, all seasons with a reason. A giant oak tree starting from a tiny acorn which has rotted in the ground, until the first beginnings of everything she would become had poked through the cold earth and grown into branches bearing hundreds of acorns, each of which may grow into a forest of trees. The tree lets go of its leaves when the strong November winds blow through her branches. She could cling to them, but that would use up all her energy. There would be no energy left to keep her roots alive. A tree teaches us that it is better to bend in the wind than to break, that it is necessary for the blossoms to fall to make way for the fruit to fall to nourish other creatures and to strengthen her own roots, that the leaves which fall in the autumn protect the roots in their winter sleep. The buds on the tips of the branches may have no idea of the vast structure of life, of branches and trunk that hold them in being and bring their awakening, but they awaken anyhow, without needing to know why and how. Perhaps that tree is wiser in her way than we can be, for the natural world has its own deep logic, and all its wisdom is directed towards the continuance of life. If you're interested in relearning more, there is a book called The Secret Life of Trees that gives a fascinating insight into some of the lessons we can learn from trees and forests of the world. Henri Nouwen says, "You belong to God, and it is as a child of God that you are sent into the world. You need spiritual guidance. You need people who can keep you anchored to your true identity. The temptation to disconnect from that deep place in you where God dwells and let yourself be drowned in the praise or blame of the world always remains. But it is through faith we are sustained and renewed. It is through community that we are held. It is in the light of God we travel." This Sunday we will open our church for worship again. It will be different. No singing, faces covered, socially distant, and only a limited number of people. And whether you choose to come and join us in the building, and if you do, please remember to book your place either online or through phoning the office, or whether you choose to continue to worship online and at home, remember we are all part of God's community, God's family, part of a greater whole, part of a bigger story. This will be the last of the midweek thoughts in this format. From next week, on a Wednesday, we hope to be able to bring you the previous Sunday service from Midstock Church. It may even have some songs added. Since we can't sing in church, we will try to add some songs to the online version that broadcasts from Wednesday, so you can sing along. It'll be an even more improved version of the service. But speaking of singing, let's sing today's song. It's one of my favourites, "Father, I Place Into Your Hands."